It's a new year. There's a new presidential administration. Technology is rapidly advancing and consumer behavior is changing. So, what will it all mean for small businesses in 2025? And how will it impact African American entrepreneurs? I checked in with Mark Lee, who's the president and CEO of the Lee Group, to talk about the trends, the challenges, and the opportunities for businesses this year. We have this conversation every year, you and I, first of all, here on American Black Journal, but I feel like this year is a little different. Things seems a little more volatile than they normally do in January. A lot of that has to do with the presidential election, of course, but there's some other things going on that make this a little bit different. So let's start with just your assessment of what we're facing and what we're likely, I guess, to be facing, especially from a business perspective, a small business perspective here, at least in the first quarter or so of this year.
Absolutely. It's never a dull moment, is it? Whenever we think things calm down, they don't. Great question. I think expectations as we begin to think about the first quarter. So exactly what you just said, it's going to be volatility. And I think one of the challenges as we begin to think about moving into the new year is we have a new administration, obviously just took seat recently. And the challenge as you think about a new administration, that means uncertainty. And so from a business perspective, there's always been the old adage, if the Democrats are elected, you can expect X. If a Republican is elected, you can expect Y. And so when we think about the expecting Y, now that you have a Republican administration, historically, they have been known to be relatively business friendly, cut the taxes, cut the cost out. If you do that, that gives you the opportunity to spend more money and make more profit at the bottom line. Now, I just don't guarantee that's going to take place beginning this particular administration. So I think to answer your question, the expectation short term is volatility because no one knows what the future holds.
So the strategy then, if you're someone who owns a small business where every decision, of course, has tremendous potential impact on the business itself, do you hunker down for this period and just kind of protect what you have? Or do you maybe lean into the possibility of something big happening? I know a lot of people, for instance, who think that the stock market is going to go pretty crazy in the first quarters of this year. If you're a small business owner, can you afford to sort of take advantage of that and try your luck, I guess, and hope that this volatility, at least for the short term, ends up in an upswing?
Recommendation to small businesses is to make yourself aware, pay attention, make sure you understand the policies that are be coming out of Washington, D.C., as well as, quite frankly, out of Lansing, because those have a major impact. You think about the stock market, for example, only 50% of the American people are invested in the stock market. And a lot of those people who are invested in the stock market are probably a little bit more well off than those certainly considering starting a business. Again, you and I chatted about this before. The average small business has less than $10,000 in the bank. So can you afford to put that, for example, invest in the stock market? So what I tell businesses from a business perspective certainly is to make sure you pause, make yourself aware of the policies. Every decision coming out of DC is going to impact your bottom line. Do not rush and certainly make any rash decisions, but be patient and hope that things fall in your place longer term.
Yeah. So what are some of the other things that businesses are facing aside from the political environment that they ought to be thinking about in 2025? As I said up front, it's not just the election. There's a lot of uncertainty, it seems, and the change in consumer bases, the change in technology, and its effect on your business and on consumers. It seems like that's picking up too.
One of the biggest challenges that moving forward still will be inflation. The economy stabilized somewhat last year. Inflation, in fact, came down. It came down more than half, close to 100% over the course of the last 12 months. don't get too comfortable. I mean, we're seeing what's happening with food prices again. Now, all of a sudden, eggs, for example, are going through the roof. And so inflation is still going to be an issue as we move forward this year. Again, with the volatility, the Fed is considering cutting interest rates again. They're still trying to battle with those decisions again in Washington, D.C. So inflation is not going to go away. I think a recession on the horizon.
Mm.
Uh, I think that's still minimal at this point, but that's never out of the question. So it depends on how consumers are spending, because you're spot on. Consumers will continue to evolve and change their overall behavioral patterns. So if prices go up, what do? They pull back. And that's going to have a major impact on your business, because you may have a service particular you may be part of the service industry, restaurants, for example. So if prices go up, consumers will pull back. The other thing that's critical this year, I want people to pay close attention to, is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm.
That certainly there was a lot of pullback from corporations last year. That's certainly not going to change this year. I mean, some organizations have become very explicit in the need not to have
Mhm.
DEI programs. So if you're a business, that could affect your expenditure levels, because some programs were investing in Black businesses to help them elevate their bottom lines. So the bottom line there is that don't get too comfortable. Well, let me rephrase that. Be concerned about the future of DEI programs moving forward.
Yeah. What about access to capital? Because of inflation, of course, interest rates have not been great for businesses as well as individuals. But small businesses need operating capital. They need investment capital for infrastructure and things like that. What is the advice, I guess, for maintaining your access to that capital and making sure that that capital doesn't cost you too much?
Access to capital is always the number one issue for small businesses, whether or not the economy is strong, whether or not the economy is not strong. Access to capital always rises to the top. My advice for small businesses is to diversify your income stream from a business perspective. Look at all your financing options. Historically, as you know, people have looked traditionally at banks to get a loan.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be careful with that. I mean, it's still a viable option, but don't forget to look at things or programs such as grants. Grants, those are the types of programs where you can get access to capital or capital. You don't have to pay the money back, but you simply have to prove what you're going to deliver on that investment, also called a grant. So look at your traditional financing sources, look at your non-traditional financing sources. I still discourage people, don't use your credit cards to finance your business.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, that's going to break your bank, based on interest rates. So be very frugal, be very methodical, very strategic, and do your research to look at both traditional and non-traditional financing for your business.
Yeah, yeah. So this is also a huge year for political change in the city of Detroit,
You know,
and it is really the first time in many years that there's, I guess, more uncertainty about what will happen. Mayor Mike Duggan, who served for 3 terms, says he's done. So somebody else will win that election this year. City Council has a new map to run on, and that could lead to some changes. There are a lot of things that are up in the air. If you're a local business here in Detroit, if you're an African American owned business in Detroit, how much attention should you be paying to those changes, and what should you be doing inside your business to get ready for them?
you should pay a lot of attention to what's going on. And here's why. So yes, the mayor, we all know, has announced his intention to run for governor. So this will bring in a new administration later this year in terms of the election. And so, Detroit has relatively, the last 4 years, have had a very good relationship to Mayor Duggan with Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, you've seen dollars come into the city. Now, what's happening, just as we discussed earlier, there's going to be volatility and uncertainty. Obviously, we got the new administration in D.C. So, what's the relationship going to be between Detroit and Washington, D.C.? So, if I'm a small business, again, pay attention. Don't pull the blanket over your eyes. Understand what the opportunities may be, what the challenges are going to be, because some people argue that the new administration is not going to be as free flowing with resources as with the previous administration. So clearly, pay attention. Understand, again, begin to insulate yourself, invest your resources, and make smart, strategic decisions for your business. Don't make those rash decisions. Always have a plan moving forward.
What about the idea of starting a business? Lots of people are always thinking, well, when I get the chance, I'm going to start a business, and then they don't always act on it. Is this a good time? If you're,
Absolutely.
yeah, is this a good time to do that?
Again, starting a business, you have to ask yourself, what's a good time for you? If
Mhm.
you feel like you have the passion, if you have the resources, if you understand what the customers are looking for, it's always a good time to start a business. The challenge is that people always jump into doing that without having that plan.
Mhm.
So when you don't have that plan, what happens to increase? You have a higher increase or a higher probability that your business is not going to be successful. So actually, look in 2024, Stephen, the SBA actually increased its lending efforts to small businesses, particularly Black-owned businesses. And so what they're saying is, we still believe in you and we trust in you. So my recommendation is be frugal, be strategic. It's always a good time to start a business, but don't do it based on impulse. Just make sure you have that plan. And I would encourage you, if you have the desire and the passion, you know what, go for it.
That'll do it for us this week. You can find out more about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org, and you can connect with us anytime on social media. Take care, and we'll see you next time.